Welcome to 52 Weeks of Hope, Jennie.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That was an amazing introduction. I really am so looking forward to having this discussion.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so first of all, before we get to how do you know what your one superpower is when there's so many shiny objects, because that I definitely want to hear you talk about being multi-passionate. And I first want to get a definition on what that even is.
Yeah. So I feel like that's one of those, if you know, you know, if you are, you struggle with focus, with knowing what to do next and how to move the needle forward, because you have so many projects that you want to be working on concurrently. So if you've changed jobs a lot of times throughout your life, and I constantly say, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And that's not really true. I really have zeroed in on what is my lifeblood passion at this point. But if you say those words, then you are multi-passionate. Okay. I describe it as squirrel-brained. I describe it as, shiny object syndrome, but it all means the same thing.
Okay, so what did you hone in on?
So there's a lot. I want to be a novelist. I think that's the thing that if I go to my deathbed without having done, I will actually feel regret. So I'm 55,000 words into my first novel, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
I have a very deep spiritual practice. So that's in the world of paganism and Wicca. And what's so wonderful for a person like me about that practice is it's like going back to school. There's so much to learn. I will never be done studying. It's about art and intuition and meditation and getting in touch with nature. And I could go on and on and on. And so I've learned that because I love that so much, it's not something I want to monetize. It's just something that I want to keep sacred and have that be my joy activity. So I also do that. I podcast. It's my favorite thing in life. And that's really just an opportunity to share stories of other multi-passionates who are making an impact and proving that you don't have to be a specialist in order to do that. So the podcast brings me joy. And then I have started to create courses. I have one flagship course right now and another one that's coming out in about a month that really just help people who are like me figure out how to make money from their passions and not feel scattered and overwhelmed and actually feel at peace and like they're making real progress.
Okay. So how does somebody hone in on what it is that is their superpower when everything seems so great?
Yeah. So it's a process that I walk people through, and it starts with a brain dump. I think we feel overwhelmed because ideas come in and we're like, oh, that sounds good. And it's very distracting. So if you're involved in an activity when that happens, you're sort of unsure of where to go next. The brain dump is kind of the solution to overwhelm. Write down everything that has ever been interesting to you, anything that might be interesting, something you want to do once, and then just check the box and say you did it. Make the list exhaustive. And that act in and of itself is just this sigh of relief. Everything's been captured on paper. You've gotten it out of your brain. And now there's a little bit of empty space to breathe again. And then it's a combination from there of determining what your real superpowers are. What are the things people ask you for help with? When do you feel most beautiful and most confident? What are the activities you're engaged in at that moment? You make a list of those, and then you compare it to what the needs of the market are. One of the modules in my course is all about market research. So just asking what people need or paying attention to what people come to you and ask you for help with. And putting all of that together is sort of pouring all of your ideas into a sieve and slowly narrowing it down until you end up with, ideally, about 3 to 5 that make the most sense to pursue right now. It does not mean you have to leave everything else on that brain dump behind, but you can't do it all at once. That's just obvious. Yeah. So you start with, your money maker, and then you have maybe 2 other side projects that you do on the side. And I teach how to manage all of that, how to create sacred time in your calendar, even if you work a full-time job, even if you are a parent managing a household, so that you can fit those passions in and actually make progress on them. Because that's the big problem, right? Is you do so many things that you don't feel like you're seeing any real progress on any of them.
Right. So how do you create time?
It's about being intentional. I think that especially women in today's society have this belief that we have to be nice. Like that's the number one thing that everybody expects of us. And that means saying yes to too many things. And what I think is really fascinating is, so, you hear that say no to more things. But Elizabeth Gilbert brings up a really good point. She says it's not about saying no to the things that you don't want to do. It's actually about saying no to a lot of things that you do want to do, because what you most want to do is most important. So that intentionality, that sitting down and finding out what the thing is that you will regret not having done on your deathbed. Okay, is that more important to carve an hour out on the weekend to do that? Or is it important to say yes to the bake sale for the PTA? Like you really have to make some hard choices.
Yeah, no, that is such a good point. I have certain people that came to mind right away.
Yeah.
Like, I'll hand them this podcast, or I'll send them the link. Wait, I think this is for you.
Perfect.
Yeah. It's like yesterday I did and it's actually in my weekly email, that I actually threw on a t-shirt and took a walk outside just to get outside, first of all, because the day before, all of a sudden it was dark out and I'm scared of coyotes. So I don't like walking in this neighborhood, particularly during the dark. Anyway, and I just got outside. I got sunshine, just what I talk about, just clear my head, get outside, do a good, even if it's a 20-minute power, whatever it is. And I felt so much better. And it's one of the ways to just feel better instantly.
And that's something that it's important to you. So you make the time, and that's all it is figuring out what's important to you and then putting that in your life every single day. I love that. Yeah,
absolutely. It's just like meditation. It's somehow or another gives me more time because it gives me connection. That's amazing. So how did you get to this place in your life where you have clarity or focus, or you can coach others to find out their own superpower?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like a lot of multi-passionates have this same sort of growing up story where you just felt like you were doing life wrong. Basically, from the moment we were chose to choose a major in college. At 17, the prefrontal cortex of our brain isn't fully developed yet, and that's our decision-making faculties right there. So you're supposed to pick what you're going to do for the rest of your life before that part of your brain even really knows how to do that. And I went in as an environmental chemistry major and started flunking out of school. So I switched to theater and graduated with a theatrical costume design degree.
From chemistry to theater. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's a 180.
I had to change my major even because I had to have a non-congruent major. So I changed from Spanish to anthropology. It was my whole life looked like that. And then I moved to New York and because I wanted to do costume and started working for a woman who was a couture designer on the Upper East Side. And it was the most thankless, grotesque job. When The Devil Wears Prada came out, my mom sent me the book and said, "This is your life." And I was like, oh, what am I doing? And then I got engaged and then decided I wanted to be a wedding planner and got certified. And we moved to
There's a
LA.
Certification for wedding planning?
There's a wedding planner certification from the Wedding Planners Association of America.
Okay.
Yeah. And the bottom line is I kept changing. I would do something for 2 years. I would even open a business in many cases. And we'll get to why this happened. Then I would close it. So I have all of these failed businesses in my past, and I felt like a flake. I felt like I was doing my life wrong. And I just hear the same story from so many people. If you stuck to one thing, you'd be so successful. The implication being I wasn't successful. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't just stick with one thing. And then I came across the book Refuse to Choose by Barbara Sher. And she wrote it in the late 70s. So it's not new. And Barbara actually has recently passed away. But the work that she did while she was here to help people like me understand that they are not broken, that we just have brains that work differently from other people's brains. The real key is to figure out what's going to make us feel like we're thriving, because the fact of the matter is one job for the rest of our lives is not, we're going to feel like we are dying on the vine. So our lives are going to look differently, and that's completely okay. And when I started finding people to interview on the podcast who were success stories in and of themselves, by their own right, and I just knew that it was my job to bring that to the rest of the world so that other people could hear that it is possible to do. It's just a matter of getting clear. Everyone says that the problem is focus. I can't focus. I'm easily distracted. I don't know what to do next. You've got to get clear before you can ever hope to have focus. So I just went through like journaling and hiring coaches and therapy and shadow work, and just it runs the gamut, the work that I did, and ultimately was able to come up with a system that in turn helps other people figure this out for themselves.
Yeah, which is great. So other things that people, because everybody can't work with you. I know a lot of people can, but other tools that people, besides doing the brain dump and getting clear and looking to see what, the few things are. Let's see, how about the confidence factor? Well, that's really great for you, Jennie, but I can't do that. Which is fear, of course. Fear to take that leap. Like here, you've done all that, but people are like, they have this idea and they know, well, this is the thing I want to do, but they're afraid to take that leap. What would you tell somebody?
Yeah, that's such a big one, especially if you're creative. I think imposter syndrome is just a voice in your head all the time telling you that you're not original and no one cares what you have to say. And who are you? Especially for us, because we're not experts. We're jacks of all trades, right? So who wants to listen to me if I'm not an expert at anything? So I'm going to give you my best tip for when it comes to overcoming imposter syndrome, because I just love this and I love using it with my students. We all know what vision boards are, right? So, and they're great. And for the people that they work for, more power to you. I absolutely love that. But the problem with a vision board is that it's all the things that you don't yet have. So if you're not in the right headspace, it can make you feel lack. There's a certain way of thinking about it that propels you forward rather than being like, well, that's all the stuff I don't have. I'll be happy once I have that. My modality is to use something called an accomplishments board. So it's a collage like a vision board. And you can do a physical one or one on your computer, but it's all of the things that you have to celebrate about your existence. And when I take people through this process, I'm like, we're talking everything. We're talking the thank you card that you got from your stepdaughter because she's just so grateful to have you in your life. Are you an amazing dog mom? That goes on the accomplishments board. Mine has photos. I had a whole stint where I was a cooking instructor and a private chef to people with food allergies. So I have a photo of the most beautiful plate of sushi I've ever made in my life, and all of my Halloween costumes from all of my costume design years. And it is an amazing psychological tool. If you put it somewhere where you can see it every day and you're like, oh, those are all the things that make me a badass and make me unique and special. It doesn't have to be about being an expert. It has to be about what is your unique selling proposition. How are you a unicorn? And people can learn from you because you're the only one who knows the things that you know. When you see it every day, when you see those reasons to celebrate yourself every single day, it imprints on your mind. And suddenly the volume on that inner critic goes way, way down. I almost believe it's a cure. I mean, I don't want to say imposter syndrome goes away ever because I don't think that's really true, but it will do wonders for your mental state, because all you have to do is look at that and be like, if you have an interview and you're nervous, go look at your accomplishments board and you'll be like, I got this. I'm awesome.
Oh, totally. And everyone has their own unique handprint. Nobody can do what you can do the way you can do it. And if you've got that job, there's a reason you got it, because it's always like, oh, I want this job. And then you get it and you're like, I can't do it. It's like, of course you can. You got it for a reason. So
yeah. And I mean, I'm amazed by the accomplished people who admit that they have an inner critic voice in their own heads. I mean, people you would never expect to actually feel that.
Maya Angelou used to talk about it. Meryl Streep, Michelle Obama. I mean, it's very high functioning women.
Big Magic is Elizabeth Gilbert's book about shutting up the inner critic.
I mean, it's very high performing people that talk about imposter syndrome for sure. There was something else you said that made me think about, it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the nurtured.
Yeah.
And so we want a nurturing, compassionate, kind voice to ourselves.
Absolutely.
So,
And
yeah.
that's what this is. Like when you get to wrap yourself in a warm blanket of all of the reasons you're amazing, what a different feeling that is from the way most of us move through our lives, where we're like, oh, I look old, or I put on 5 pounds. This
Yeah.
is a different dialogue you get to have with yourself.
Yeah. No mean girl self-talk.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, definitely not. So you've interviewed some incredible people. Are there tips that you just start incorporating for yourself? Because I know I definitely do that with people I interview.
Yeah, it's mostly for me. I've always been on a mission to find the time management system that is going to work best for me, and that is a work in progress. It's constantly evolving, and so that's sort of my favorite thing to ask people about. Like, you've written 8 books. How do you manage your time? And then I usually implement their system for a while. What I have found that works best for me, and I agree that the reason I've had to try out all these other systems to see if they worked is because everyone sort of needs their own unique system. And I do work with people to help them create the one that works for them. But I have what I call my 5 priorities system that is sort of an amalgamation of the best tips I've heard from my podcast guests. And essentially it's those things I mentioned at the beginning that are my ultimate passions, having my work week scheduled out and then committing a percentage. Like, think of a pie chart.
Mhm.
My 5 priorities are on that pie chart, and they each have a slightly different percentage of that 40-hour work week that I want to commit to them. But within that structure, I'm going to spend 10 hours working on my novel. I'm going to spend 15 hours working on my podcast. Within that structure, I can do whatever I want. So as long as I'm spending 15 hours, it can look however it needs to look. And I believe that creative people go into a creative field because they're like, it's going to be free. I'm a freewheeling creative. I can do whatever I want. That is not the way to thrive as a creative. And if you read about, famous artists, all of them had a system. And I just believe that the system is flexible structure. So within that 5 priorities methodology, I get to be loose, and that really satisfies my creative needs while getting stuff done.
Oh, that's good. So you don't set specific hours, or in the day you just set.
If I have an appointment like this with you, it's on the calendar, and then I'll put some other stuff that feels important that day, but it's sort of what I feel like do. If it's not due that day and I feel like doing something else, that's okay. And that just lets me feel like I'm still in charge of my life. I get to move things around based on what I'm most inspired to do at the moment, which is really nice.
Yeah,
Very
that's really good.
Yeah.
So what's the hardest challenge you've gone through, and how did you get through it?
Yeah. So I'll tell you a story about my fear of being visible, because if you are going to be an online business person, you have to be visible. You cannot hide from that reality. My first foray into self-development was reading Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way when I was 20 years old. And I learned about shadow artists, which are essentially people who have the creative yearning inside of themselves, but who, for whatever reason, never do it, never make their art. And my 20-year-old self thought that was like the saddest thing I could possibly imagine. It just broke my heart into a million pieces. What I didn't realize was that I was a shadow artist. And the reason I didn't realize that is because in my personal life, I'm like an adrenaline junkie. I do all kinds of crazy things. I will skydive. I will cage dive. I traveled around the country for a summer tent camping by myself. I moved to a foreign country where I didn't know anyone and didn't speak the language. And I didn't even realize any of that was weird. And then I would have these conversations with people where they would say, "Aren't you scared? Aren't you scared to do that?" And I was like, "No." And then suddenly I realized that some people found the stuff that I did very willingly. They thought that required courage. So here I am. I'm like, I'm very courageous. But that's why I kept opening and closing these businesses. I would get them perfect. I would get my certification. I would be so good at what I did. But then I would have to go to a networking function, or God forbid, make a video or do an interview, or I used to be terrified of getting on a Zoom call with people. It wasn't even like a recorded Zoom call. Just something about that was crippling to me. It's crazy to say now because I come through and I'm on the other side.
Yeah.
But all of that changed when I met a boy, and within a month sold all of my belongings in LA and left my life behind and moved across the country to be in a relationship with him. And when I say it crashed and burned, imagine the worst case scenario. It was worse. I walked into a very dangerous situation. There were literally times where I would go camping with him and text my friends, if you never hear from me again, this is where I last was. It was as if I was in a cult. Like, it's crazy to say that out loud, and that the fact that I didn't just leave, but it was so difficult for me to extricate myself from this man. And when I finally did leave, it was the result of a very public display of infidelity. It took a long time after I left. He convinced me to be in a long distance relationship with him. He was basically a very charming psychopath. So I left. I was on my way home and I got a text message from a friend. I was a bartender for many years. He was a regular of mine. He's like, I'm going to check on you after you move. And it said, how are things going with the guy in Massachusetts? And I said, oh, Paul, no, it did not work out. And he said to me, and I love how this happens. It's a very simple thing that he said, but when the student is ready, the teacher will come. He said, if you would never have tried, you wouldn't have known. And it just landed so profoundly in that moment, because what I realized was I was at my rock bottom, like emotionally. I didn't know who I was anymore. He had me questioning if I even liked who I was as a person. It was very, very bad. It was my worst moment for sure. And I thought to myself, I still would do it again. I still would have to know. This is the worst case scenario. This is what I was afraid of happening. And I would still go through this again just so that I could know. So I turned and I looked at my entire business life up to that point and said, how can I not know? I have to do these things, no matter how scary they are. Honestly, nothing will ever be this bad as this moment right now. Nothing. I can't imagine. So screw it. I'm doing everything. I'm trying it all. And from that moment, that's when I started the podcast. Being on camera used to scare me to death. And now I do it literally every day. And I just think that being able to figure that out for myself, that like, I'm still here, I'm still standing. That rock bottom didn't destroy me. So there is nothing out there that is going to destroy me. And the really curious thing is that confidence follows action. You have to do the thing first before you're like,
oh, absolutely.
I'm capable of doing that thing. It's the reverse order. It's counterintuitive. But once you start taking action, you prove to yourself that you can. And that is the push I want to give my students. Do it first. I'm here to catch you if you fall, but you're not going to.
Yeah. And you're never alone through any of it. Like, you surround yourself with those people. And once you take the action, the universe rises up to meet you. You start attracting all these amazing people that are going to just buoy you. And it's just true. As soon as you start taking even the smallest steps towards your dream, I don't know how that works. It just does. Yeah. When I made my episode number 1, they're like, oh, you have to tell your story. I go, I'm not doing that. I'm interviewing people. I'm like, I'm not telling my story. And I did a perfunctory kind of nothing. And I knew it was nothing. And so I deleted it. And then I went, blah. And I never listened to it. I sent it off. And I was like, okay, if I get hit, this was the thing. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow and then it's out there. So who cares? That was the only thing that got me through.
Yeah.
I was like, I just kept thinking I could die tomorrow. And then who cares? This is before my kid's dad died. So I wasn't as worried about it. But now I'm like, nothing can happen to me.
Yeah.
At least right now. But at the time it was, but I so understand. And nobody's paying that much. This is what the other thing, here I am 2 years later, nobody's paying that much attention to you. And I haven't found a softer way to say that, but I learned that.
No, I was going to say, I love when you tell people that nobody's paying attention, because I say nobody cares. It sounds very it sounds mean, but it's a little bit comforting to know that when you're first starting out and putting reels on Instagram, very few people are actually seeing them. So what do you have to worry about?
I know. My husband goes, you don't look very good on that one. I'm like, who cares? I was told you don't take them down. I'm like, really? Nobody pays attention. I know I don't, but it was the message, not how I look. I'm like, I'm just trying to tell people nobody's paying attention. So I'm really going to take it down because I don't look good. I don't know how to do that stuff. I didn't grow up with it. So, and my daughter isn't here anymore to say, Mom, you look so whatever. You know, she was always recording. She grew up with us. She can make these things in a blink. She's 22, so she totally grew up with it. She grew up recording us all the time surreptitiously, and we're like, "What are you doing?"
What?
Oh yeah, see, yeah. Ask any 22-year-old girl, mind you. The boys weren't as bad. So yeah, nobody is paying that much attention to you. It's a blink. There's something else taking someone's attention, or they're thinking about themselves. But it is from our deepest despair that the most growth blossoms.
Yeah.
It just is. You know, it's not from my darkest point that this podcast emerges, but it's definitely from darkness. It's how my intro always starts. So yeah, it's so true. I love that you share that. I so appreciate it. So what's the most common question that you're asked when you tell people what you do? What do people usually ask you?
I mean, people do ask me how I manage my time, but as I said, that answer has evolved.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's the multi-passionate response. People ask me what recipes I have that will get their kids to eat vegetables. A friend of mine wanted to do something special for his fiance before they got married. So he wanted all of the details about how to plan her a surprise brunch that would just blow her mind. And so it's people tapping into my old areas of expertise. I'm coordinating a wedding for some friends of mine who are getting married next year. So people come to me with the questions about my past lives. Even around Halloween, I get like, so I'm thinking of doing this for Halloween. Like, any ideas about what I should do for my costume? So it's never one question. It's just relating back to all of my various past career lives. And I have a lot of knowledge in those areas. So, and I love to help people.
Yeah, definitely you do. Do you have a message of hope you want to give?
I do. I really do. And it's for multi-passionates specifically, but the bottom line is that the standard markers of success don't apply to you. You need to redefine success for yourself. And you may find that it is nothing more than getting to drink tea on your patio as the sun rises in the morning and spend the time when you want to with your loved ones and make art and sell it on Etsy. It doesn't have to be 7 figures, 401k, written up in Forbes magazine. Maybe that isn't what it is for you. So redefine success for yourself, because that is all you need to feel fulfilled and live a life that you absolutely love.
Yay. Oh, that's great. I love that. Is there anything else I should have asked you that we're going to be done here and you'll be like, Lauren didn't ask me that?
I don't think so. I think we covered it.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for being a guest today on 52 Weeks of Hope. And of course, all of Jennie's links and everything she does and how to get in touch with her will be on the website in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. This was an absolute blast.
Yeah.